Alright, so hopefully you gave it a try. Hopefully you gave it some thought, but I'm going to go ahead and walk through it now. First thing that I want to do is I want to be clear. I want to sort the hotels array non-destructively. In order to sort it non-destructively without changing the original array, I need to create a copy of the array. Okay, I need to create a copy of the hotels array, and that copy is what we're going to sort. Now, a couple videos ago, I did show you how to efficiently make a copy, but we're going to get a little more involved this time. I'm going to start by trying to make a copy of this array in the manner that I think you guys at this point in time would execute this. Okay, so I'm going to try to code this the way I expect you would at this point in time. And I'm not trying to imply that there's anything wrong with the way you would code it at this point in time. I just want to draw connections between where you guys currently are and where I want to push you towards. So, first thing that I would probably do is create an empty array in a variable called copy or something like that. Then I would write a function and call it copy array, which loops through the hotels array and uses that new .push method to push every item in the hotels array to copy. And then all we need to do is invoke copy array. Reload. Let's call copy and compare. Looks good. Okay, looks like this this sort is still being fired, so that's why they don't look identical. But it looks good. We've effectively made a copy of the hotels array. There we go. All right, so far so good. So this is how I would expect you guys to approach making a copy of an array. And this works. There's nothing wrong with it. But I want us to start thinking a little more functionally, which means there are a couple things that we have to talk about. I'm going to give you the short version right now, and we're going to be digging in much more deeply over the course of the next week or so. Short version is to think functionally, to write functionally, functional code. We want to keep our code as modular as possible, which means, in essence, our functions, we don't want them to have to reach outside of themselves, ever if we can help it, but sometimes we can't. Sometimes they have to do that. But we don't want our functions to be reaching outside of themselves. So in this example, where is my function copy array reaching outside of itself? Well, the obvious one is copy. Okay, var copy is a variable declared outside of the function, and we are pushing something into that variable, into that array. So that's one example of reaching outside of itself. The other one is this function is reaching out to hotels. It's using the hotels variable. It's accessing the length of the hotels variable, the hotels array, and it is pushing each item in the hotels array. Okay, so it's 2 instances, 3 if you count hotels twice, where this function is reaching outside of itself. We want to try to contain that as much as possible from here on out. Okay, this var copy and var hotels, they have both been declared what's called globally, or in the global scope, or the global execution context. That means that any function, any variable, any statement or expression, any code can access either of these variables. Okay? The reason why we don't want functions to reach outside of themselves is we want them to be as pure as possible. And when we say pure, we mean predictable. We mean predictable. This function is only predictable as long as hotels doesn't change and as long as copy stays an array. If for whatever reason copy was a number, that would destroy the functionality of this function. Does that make sense? Or if hotels ever changes in any way, that's going to change the functionality of this function. Okay, the way in which this function works and the way in which it is determined if this function works is based on what it does. And if changes to variables outside the scope of this function could affect the way this function does what it needs to do, it is not a pure function. So how can we make this copy array function more pure? Very first thing I would do is take this variable copy and declare it inside my function. Okay, so now it's no longer reaching outside of itself for copy. And all we need to handle is hotels. Well, we have a function called copy array. So what would you describe this function as doing? It copies an array. Do we need it to only copy the hotels array? I mean, does this function only exist to make a copy of one specific array in all of the code that we might write? What if we need to copy another array? Are we going to create a new function, copy array 2, in order to copy that array? You might, but the answer should be no. We want to use copy array under any circumstances in which we want to copy an array, whether it's hotels or whether it's some other array, whether it's students, basketball players, books, TV shows, whatever it is that we might be copying, we want to be able to use this function. So in order to do that, we need to redefine hotels and its role in this function. And rather than refer to an outside variable, we're going to make this into an argument. Okay, we're going to make this an argument, and I'm going to call this argument any array. So as long as copy array receives an argument of any array, it should perform a very predictable function. It's going to copy any array. So let's go ahead and switch out hotels for our parameter name, any array. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of this invocation down here, and we're just going to test this for a little bit in the console. If I write copy array, it's going to show me the actual function, which is great, but not too necessary for me right now. If I try to invoke copy array with no argument, I get an error. With no argument in there, any array is undefined. Cannot read property length of undefined. Undefined.length right here. So that causes an error to be thrown, which means we can't invoke copy array without an argument. So let's invoke copy array with an argument. Let's try 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the function works, we got no error, but it returned undefined. Reason for that is we don't actually do anything with copy, do we? We push all this stuff to it, but then what happens? As soon as this function ends, copy actually disappears. Okay, take a moment on that. Because variable copy excuse me, because variable copy is declared inside the function, it doesn't exist in the global scope outside of the function. So as soon as this function ends, var copy is gone. That's an important point, okay? You can refer or mutate or change a variable from inside a function if that variable has been declared outside. But if a variable is declared inside a function, it only exists for the scope of that function. It only exists in that function's execution context. So once this function ends, copy is gone. We can't use it. We can't access it anymore. So in order to make this function more useful, after our for loop, after we push everything into copy, we want to return copy. Let's try this again now. I'm going to copy 1, 2, 3, 4. And it returns 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try with an array of strings. Copy array A, B, C, ABC. Now, how about we try copy array hotels? It returns hotels. Okay, this is a clean function. It is not dependent on any outside variables. It's only dependent on an argument, which means as long as the developer, the user, the way in which the structure of the website, as long as somehow a predictable argument is plugged into this function, a predictable output will be returned. This is a clean function. So what you're going to start seeing as you try to think functionally and code functionally is you're going to be using arguments quite a bit more. And you're going to be storing functions inside of variables quite a bit more. Now what do I mean by that? Well, this function works. It effectively returns a copy of the original array, but are we able to use that array? Are we able to use this copied ABC, this copied 1, 2, 3, 4, this copied hotels? Currently, not really, because it returns and then the browser moves on. So what can we do to make sure that this copy is stored somewhere? Well, what we can do is create something like hotels copy and set it equal to the copy array function invoked on the hotels array. So now copy array is going to run. It's going to run on the hotels array. Copy is going to be contained an identical copy of the hotels array of objects, and that is what is going to be returned, which means that is going to be what hotels copy is equal to, what hotels copy contains. I'm going to change this console log to hotels copy, and there it is. Okay, it got a little stringified there because of my concatenation, but if I get rid of this, it's going to look just like the original. There you go, the original hotels array. So hotels copy is now a safe copy, which we can safely sort, mutate, change without affecting the original hotels variable. All right, and we did this with a clean function, some clean functional code, and we're good to go. Okay, so functional Thinking functionally is going to be something, as I said, we're going to discuss over time. But try to consider, just like take a couple moments and think about why writing this way might be easier to manage. I'm not going to say better. I'm not going to put a value judgment on it, although let's be frank, it's better. But why might this be easier code to manage and read? Well, one answer, one of many, is that if anything ever breaks in your code, if anything ever goes wrong, if your code is structured very modularly in these very contained, very concise functions that perform very specific tasks, it becomes so easy to find your errors, to troubleshoot them, to figure out where your code broke down. Because every function then is like a very small link in a very long chain. All you need to do is find that one broken link and fix it or replace it. Whereas if you do not code functionally, it's more like a rope that starts to fray. Even if you found the one spot where the rope was fraying, it's not going to be that easy to fix. It's not going to be that easy to just string it back together and have a rope that was as strong as it was before. Maybe this analogy is getting tired, but hopefully you get the idea. We're going to have lots of practice with it, so don't worry. For now, just try to wrap your brain around exactly what's happening here and here. Okay? All right, so moving on. Now we have a copy of hotels that we can work with. So let me get rid of this console log. Let me bring this back, and I'm going to change hotels to hotels copy. So we're now sorting the hotels copy. Let's see if it's sorted by price. It is 220, 250, 270, 350, 400. So far, so good. Now, the next step is we need price here to be something dynamic. We need to be able to tell this whole sort function here which property of these hotel objects that we want to sort by. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that we cannot add another argument into, another parameter into this function. The way in which these parameters A and B are read in this function, inside a sort function, are very particular. Any additional argument is going to be interpreted as another one of the hotel's objects. That's not going to help us. So we can't do something like A, B, property. No, we can't do that. It's not going to work. You can try it. You should try it on your own, but it's not going to work. It's going to lead us down a dead end. Somehow we need to get a dynamic variable / argument parameter in place of price coming from somewhere else. It can't come from within this function block. It's just not going to work. We need something. We need something else here. This sort function works on A and B, but we need some way to perform all of this with a specific and dynamic parameter in mind. So what we might want to do is create a new function. I'm going to call it sort by, and it's just going to contain all this code. Remember, we're thinking functionally here. So sort by simply runs exactly what we expect. Now, if we really want to think functionally, we are going to feed an argument into sort by, like some array which is going to take the place of hotels copy. But we also want to use some kind of property parameter, property argument. And this is going to take the place of price. Right? Okay. Now, quick side note here before we continue. When accessing object properties, we have up to this point used dot notation, and that has worked for us perfectly. That's great, that's awesome, it's perfect. However, you cannot use dot notation in conjunction with a variable name. Okay, you cannot use dot notation in conjunction with a variable name, which is to say, if I type a dot property and b dot property, the browser is going to look for a property called property. It's not going to look for whatever has been typed in place of this argument. This is going to force me to hit a dead end. There's a solution though. There's a common and easy alternative to access object properties. So this is hotels at the first index dot price. I can also access this with hotels at the first index bracket price as a string. Returns the exact same thing. Targets, selects, returns the exact same thing. Let me create a new object. Name Evan. That's it. That's all we need. One property. Okay, so my object dot name returns Evan. My object bracket name returns Evan. The string value the string value contained in these square brackets can be substituted for a variable name. So what I'm going to do is change our format a little bit here to A and B square bracket property. Okay, so that's the side note. Now what's going to happen here? We're going to run the sort by function. We're going to give the sort by function 2 arguments. We're going to say hotels copy, probably, and a property like price. Or let's choose a different one. How about rating? Okay, hotels copy and rating. So it's going to sort the hotels copy array using our custom sort function, and it's going to plug rating in for these properties, for these arguments here, these parameters. So it's going to say if a.rating is greater than b.rating, return 1, else return -1. And it's thereby going to sort the hotels copy array by ratings. So we now have a function within a function within a function. Let's invoke it. Sort by hotels copy, and then the property name. The property name needs to be a string. Rating. And let's go ahead and console.log that. Reload. And it's been sorted. So it returned undefined because this sort by function doesn't actually return anything. So let's have it return some array. Here we go. Now we'll see it in the console log. There we go. Okay, so that's some array sorted by ratings. Let's try running sort by hotels copy, sorted by name. And now they're in alphabetical order. Let's try by price again. Oop. Needs to be a recognizable property though. By price, now they're sorted by price, not by rating, not in alphabetical order, but by price. Now how about number of rooms? Works. Okay, so we've created this sort by function, the sort by master function, which now performs exactly as we'd expect, predictably. All we need to do is tell it what array we want to sort and what property of those objects we want to sort by. In fact, let's be even more specific in our parameters. I'm going to say some object array. Some object array. Just so any other developer who comes in here to read our code understands that this needs to be an array of objects in order for this function to do what it needs to do. Okay, so we have a function for copying any array under the sun. We have a function for sorting any array of objects under the sun by any property possessed by those objects. And we only have 1, 2 global variables. Now if we wanted to refactor this even more, make it even more pure and functional, we would get rid of this hotels copy. And we would simply execute sort by on copy array of hotels with price. Oop. Oh, I didn't save after I changed the, here we go, some object array. There we go. That'll do it. So now we have this master function. We're going to run a function as an argument, which is going to return a copy. And we're going to sort that copy by price. Bam. So if anything went wrong in this code here, I would very easily be able to trace it either to the sort by function, or to the copy function, or to the hotels array. As simple as that. Nice, clean, functional code. More arguments than we're used to up to this point, but very, very, very useful way of coding, very useful for maintaining, very useful for other developers who need to read our code. And once you get used to it, you'll see it's just much easier to think and code this way. Rule of thumb, make your functions perform as simple and contained a task as possible. It's a good place to start.